If I fill up all of my time being disconnected, numbed out, zoned out, watching some mediocre content that I didn't actually care about, and not giving myself the opportunity to do my mission here, to learn my lessons, to learn how to be the way that I came here to be. And it's almost like it like builds up, over the years. You're like, well, shoot, I haven't started yet. It might be too late. Might as well just watch some more television. Hey, friends, and welcome to the New Humans for New Earth podcast. I'm Queenie, your host, and on this podcast, we discuss the great transition into New Earth that we are all living through today. Here, we'll introduce you to wisdom, perspectives, and information to support and inspire you in making more aligned choices in your life. We're here to help co-create New Earth, so let's talk about it. Before we dive into this episode, thank you for taking a moment to hit subscribe wherever you're listening to this podcast. In this moment of great transition, messages of hope, love, kindness, compassion, and unity, and stories about people who are helping to build a better future are so important. Hitting subscribe is a free and easy way to help this podcast reach others like you who are here to help co-create New Earth. From my heart to yours, thank you. So after I came back to the States from Costa Rica, my life was this almost complete blank slate. Moving to Costa Rica had sort of acted like this really major chapter ending where I had tied up all these loose ends and exited all these contracts. And when I got back and sort of started contemplating, like, what does my new life look like? What does it mean to be a more conscious inhabitant of Earth? What does that mean for my life? One of the things that had actually survived my move to Costa Rica was my video streaming subscriptions. And, for me, one of the themes that kind of came up in reflecting on what it meant to be a more conscious inhabitant of Earth was opt out of supporting corporations who just suck up value from our communities and don't really provide any value in return, right? I sort of use this imagery in episode 9, I think, with like the big vacuums, right, that are kind of just coming and sucking up all the money. So canceling my streaming subscriptions seemed like an obvious place to sort of work on opting out. But I have to admit that I was a little scared. I'm not like a hardliner when it comes to television. Like some people are just like, look, I'm too good for that. No, that is not me. I grew up, okay, so just a little backstory on me. I am the only child of a single mom. And so, in a very real way, I was actually raised by television. Television and nature. Like I would go outside a lot by myself, but but like the two things that raised me, television and nature. And so like, I've spent a good chunk of my life watching TV and even rewatching sort of the same stuff. Like I don't know about sort of the younger generations, but when I was growing up, we had just kind of this like a collection of 40 or 50 videos. I don't even want to tell you what format they were in, but whatever, it doesn't matter. But we had like 40 or 50 movies, right, that we would just sort of rotate through. And these movies defined my childhood. And then, of course, we had television and, I remember being in grade school and I would sort of have my schedule, right? So there was the show that was on immediately after school before my mom came home, right? Or maybe there was a few of them even. And then there were sort of the shows that kind of came on after mom got home. And I had this whole like I had this whole sort of system of like I would do my homework during commercials, or even I would work on it sometimes during like the shows that I wasn't super into, but they were the only things that were really within the sphere of things that I was interested in. So, yeah, long story short, I love television. And I even used to be, I don't want to say competitive, but I really enjoy the sort of activity that happens when you watch a movie and you're like, I know that actor. Who is that? And I'm like, I know who they are. And I know all these like movies that they've been in. They did this and this and this. There's a lot of television and movies in here. Like, let's just be real about that. And so when it came to canceling my streaming subscriptions, like, I was a little nervous because even though I have a lot of interests and, I always have a project going, like this podcast, I was just like, what am I going to fill that time with? And particularly for me, like television sort of comes up in that sort of later in the evening, kind of I'm not ready for bed, but I'm too tired to do anything else, sort of like zone out veg time, and I don't know, maybe this is too vulnerable, but I'm just gonna go here anyways. Like, there's this kind of like feeling of anxiety that comes up sometimes. Like, I think maybe people who like, I'm not trying to say this in a judgy way, but, sort of what I've observed is, people who maybe lean too much on alcohol, right? It kind of like comes around in the evenings. There's kind of this like scary sort of now I'm with myself kind of experience that happens, right? And the wine comes out. Or I have a friend who refers to the Sunday scaries. And what he means when he says that is like I'm kind of like nervous about Monday rolling around and having to go back to work, and so there's a little bit of like numbing that happens Sunday evening, and that's a good TV time, right? Yeah, so I'll be honest, like there are times when I use TV to numb out, zone out, One of my can't believe I'm admitting this on the internet, but one of my sort of go-to zone out activities, right, is like not only will I be streaming something, but I'll also be like online shopping on my phone. It's like I need that double like numb out activity, and that's really what does it for me. So I'm like not really in either place, but there are screens. But so yeah, so I was a little scared, and sort of the immediate sort of impulse, right, when you take something away like that is you're like, okay, but like what am I gonna replace it with, right? And it's almost like addict sort of thinking. And the obvious place for me was the library. I don't know about your library in your area, but my library here, they actually have quite a few streaming services that you can get content through. And I signed up and poked around, and turns out that like one of them, everyone else uses all the passes pretty much before I get there, and the other one is actually pretty good. Talking about Queenie's TV habits here, but anyways, the the other one is pretty good. It's called Canopy, and they have a lot of sort of like documentaries and indie films and foreign films, some series, but I haven't found a ton there that I really enjoy. And so I got into that, but it didn't sort of scratch the itch like regular streaming did. So even though it was available to me, like I still wasn't I'm still not streaming as much. Like after those first few sort of months of canceling my streaming subscriptions, I became aware of how like addicted I was to streaming, to movies, to TV. I'd find myself sort of at home upset that I wasn't finding sort of content that I was more interested in watching through the library. Or I'd sort of find myself like inviting myself over to a friend's house who I knew had who I knew still had their subscriptions, and I'd be like, anyways, you want to watch some TV? And I'd go to the movies more. My favorite actually sort of thing that I do now is I'll periodically like go and rent a movie from a local rental store. But now that I've had, I don't know, over a year now of not having streaming subscriptions, I've actually found myself in a really comfortable place with it. Whereas television used to be this like very integral sort of part of my day to day, week to week experience, I wouldn't say that anymore. And that's not to say that I don't watch it. I mean, I do, but it's much less. Whereas I used to have maybe 3 or 4 sort of shows that I was keeping up with, it's like now I kind of have one show that I watch when I feel like it. It's not a daily thing. It's kind of like oh, this one day this week, I'm just kind of feeling doing this, as opposed to just filling up my whole evening with it, my whole weekend with it. And I guess, sort of the what I want to offer in this episode is like what I've learned, what I've observed about myself and sort of how I was using streaming before and sort of what my perspective is on that experience now. And I don't know, maybe that'll be interesting for you. I hope so. I think the biggest takeaway for me now that I don't know, detoxed myself from video streaming is that the idea that you get to have the content that you want available at any time, basically for free, is not true. That's the sort of sales pitch that these various streaming services make to us. But like the practical reality is that that isn't or wasn't my experience with streaming services, right? I mean, like, okay, if there's a streaming service that has like this TV show on it that you are really dedicated to, and that's what you want to watch, then yeah, it's probably going to be available, right? But my experience with this what is often like I don't really know what I want to watch. I'm looking for, I don't know, a movie. Maybe it's in the genre. Maybe I'm totally open, right? I just want to find a movie that is interesting to me to watch in this moment. And you would think that, like, oh my gosh, there's thousands of titles on these streaming subscriptions. So, of course, there must be something that I'm interested in watching. But over and over again, what I found was like, that wasn't my experience. What ended up happening for me, and maybe you can relate to this, is that I spent so much time searching for something that I wanted to watch. Like, I might spend half an hour searching for a piece of content that I wanted to watch in like a 2 hour sort of window. And now I've eaten up a quarter of that time and I'm exhausted because I've spent all this time sort of like flipping through stuff that didn't sort of meet my interests. And like honestly, by the time oftentimes by the time I'd get to the actual content, like I'm so frustrated by just the process of having like to find something. 'Cause sometimes I'm like, you know what, forget it. Like over it. But at the same time, it's like I got on here because I'm too tired to do anything else. So it's not like I'm really gonna get up and go do something else. I'm just like now resigned to having spent all that time to get to a suboptimal outcome, right? Because oftentimes you don't actually find something that you're excited to watch. You find something that you're willing to watch. And I don't want to bash all TV and all movies right now. Like, it's true, there are actually like some incredible shows out there. I feel like movie making has become less of a art form, but we can debate about that offline sometime. But so oftentimes, instead of actually watching something that I was interested in watching, it was like, yeah, I guess I'll watch this. I think that there's sort of another thing as well that's sort of been cropping up with these streaming services lately, and that's that you might have paid for your subscription, but they're still trying to like nickel and dime you for certain content, right? It's like you might have sort of this baseline subscription, but like the premium content is actually behind yet another paywall. Or, it's quote unquote available, but you have to get or even available for free, but you have to have like a free trial to some other streaming subscription partner. And then it's like you're faced with the choice. It's like, well, do I want to settle for the mediocre content that they've made available, quote unquote, for free in this subscription that I pay for? Or do I want to go through the rigmarole of either setting up a free trial and having to remember to cancel it afterwards? Put that little reminder in your calendar, friends. Or do I just want to cough up however much it is right now on top of the subscription fee that I've already paid? And so there's just this kind of like systematic, like, frankly, like, false advertising about what these subscriptions are. And I was out of touch with this, so I actually like went and looked up some of the details about like the subscriptions now, and like the baseline subscription anymore for all of these like subscription services come with ads. You have to pay to get advertised at, which just blows my mind because the primary value add, at least to me, and I mean, if I'm remembering correctly, for a lot of people, for these on-demand streaming services, was that you were paying so that you didn't have to get advertised at. And now we're just back to the ads. I mean, and then I don't know if this has happened to you, but it certainly happened to me. On top of all of that, right? I'm not sure what I want to watch. There's actually nothing here that I'm really excited about. The thing that I am excited about is behind a paywall, an additional paywall. On top of all of that, the whole availability of streaming services is contingent on network connectivity. I don't know how many times it happened to me that like I've gone through this whole process to actually pick out content, and then I go to press play, and for whatever reason, it doesn't work. It's like maybe there's something wrong with the internet. Maybe there's something wrong with the server. It's not even you, it's on them, right? Maybe something happened with your payment something, and like everything is messed up now because of that. I mean, like, it's that same thing where it's like technology's meant to or supposed to make our lives easier, and I'm not a technophobe. There are so many places, times, and different ways in which these kinds of technologies can fail, and there is no one waiting for you to call and ask for help, right? You have to be your IT support. And it may just be that you have to like deal if you can't figure it out, right? And I'm just like, I'm noticing the frustration in my voice just from these memories of having to deal with this. Another sort of like ongoing theme with streaming that stands out to me is, I turned to it as sort of, I don't know, now I'm thinking of it as like a way of filling time. Oftentimes we think, I watch TV because it's enjoyable. I like it, right? And in particular, like, I really like this show. I can't wait to find out what happens next. We can all relate to that. One of the shows that I really liked was Mad Men. I've probably watched that show, like, a little embarrassed to admit this, for probably like 5 times, start to finish. And I remember one of the first times was like back when I was still sort of open to binge watching stuff. But I would notice that after I had watched about 3 episodes of this show that I loved so much, like I would feel sick. Like just my whole body would feel gross, like my stomach would feel a little like un off somehow, like uneasy. And in that case, I mean, we know that like binge watching is not great for you. But for me, in that case, like I realized that despite my loving the show so much, despite the fact that like the cinematography was so beautiful, and just the storytelling was great, it's like the people in that show are not very nice to one another. I mean, I think a lot of shows are like that. And I think what was happening, in addition to just the negative aspects of binge watching, is that I was like beaming all of that people being terrible to other people energy just straight into my body. So I had to have a rule with myself. I was like, okay, we can't do 3, probably should limit to 2, and even better would probably just be 1 at a time. All right, Queenie. And I think as well, another sort of experience with streaming that we can all relate to is sort of like those just days where you're just like Netflix and chilling, or maybe you rent a cabin and you're just like, we're gonna watch movies all weekend. There's something nostalgic about it insofar as like it kind of reminds me at any rate of like childhood, back to back to back movies. When you're a kid, it's like, heck yes, get to watch movies all day. Yes. And I still have had recent experiences with that where it's fun. But if you kind of back away from that feeling of nostalgia and sort of check in with your body afterwards, it's like after a day like that, you feel like an ogre. At least I do, like your hair is all messed up and maybe you got like a crick in your neck from, like being in some weird sort of loungy position, trying to watch the TV, but also be comfortable. You probably like have some food on you from just like eating some snacks mindlessly while you're like watching your shows, right? And it's like, yeah, it's fun, but for me, it's like I kind of got to a place where I'm like, what am I doing? Like what am I doing with myself? And again, it's like not to shame or even judge myself or anyone who does that, but it's just like for me on reflection, even though I might enjoy a day like that here and there, it's like not something that feels really good. Like if I'm being honest with myself, it doesn't feel really good on my body. And then I sort of come back to sort of these moments in the evenings, right? Or the Sunday scary moments when I was using television to like numb out and zone out. Again, I think we can all relate to this behavior, right? There's so many ways that we numb out. There's so many ways that we zone out. And there's something that's appealing about that, right? I mean, when you're sort of like bombarded with, gosh, I mean, so much sensory input or so much sort of fear-based messaging, right? I mean, it's kind of this like defense mechanism to be like, you know what? I'm just gonna go over here, get in my phone or my device and just zone out for a few hours because like I don't want to deal with this. And it feels like relief, right? I think another sort of aspect of the zoning out thing is, a lot of our television watching happens together, right? Like with our friends, with our families, with our children, with our partners. What I've come to understand about myself, maybe this resonates, it's okay if it doesn't. But what I've come to realize about myself is that oftentimes when I'm watching television with someone else, or when I'm watching a lot of television with a person, it's kind of because I don't know how to connect with them, right? And this actually happened in my marriage. It's like towards the end of the marriage, we ended up watching a lot of TV together. And it was because like that connection had sort of gotten to a place where we didn't really know what to do with it anymore. At least this was my read on it. And so it was just easier to like watch TV and zone out rather than sort of figure out how to address that and sort of be connected with one another. I'm not here to tell you how to spend time with your loved ones, right? But for me, I've kind of come to a place where I'm like, I don't want that in my connections, right? Like if I notice with someone that I'm close with that we're actually ending up kind of spending most of our time together not engaging. And I don't mean like that we have to be having like a deep conversation all the time, but just maybe a better way to put it is like we're spending time but we're not connected during that time. If I notice that, it actually causes me to sort of evaluate whether this is a connection that I want to have in my life. It's like I ask myself, like, am I spending time with this person because I love them? Is there something that we need to address? Is there something else that we sort of need to like reconfigure about this connection? Like maybe we're just spending too much time together. And again, that's not to say that I never watch like movies or TV with people, like I have a close friend and we like to sort of do like, I don't know, like family time together. And so sometimes we'll watch a TV show together, but it's like we have a TV show that we watch together and it's not all the time. So looking at all of that, right? Looking at sort of the totality of the reality of the experience of like what it was to be spending so much of my time streaming movies and TV, it's kind of looking at it thinking like, you know what? I actually don't need or want this in my life, and I think kind of to zoom out a little bit, it's like, what we have in this life is our time, our energy, and our attention. And energy, like you can kind of sub out money for a second, just as like a quick little substitute for the purposes of this conversation, right? And it's like, okay, this is a huge time suck. I'm paying money for this, and it's taking my attention, both in the sense of me watching content, often content that isn't what I wanted to watch, probably like, not as fun or interesting as I was hoping. So, it's like mediocre content that I'm watching, which makes me feel a little depressed, frankly. Like when I'm spending my time watching mediocre content, I'm like a little upset. And then also it's like all of the time and frustration sort of navigating and trying to deal with these paywalls and sort of figuring out like, can I watch it here? No. Can I watch it here? No. Like, is it available here? Who knows? It's just like, And then you still might go through that whole process and still not be able to watch it. I mean, it's just like I think for me, it's like nothing has ever made me more grateful for a cable or a physical piece of media than streaming content has. Like streaming content made me a Luddite, all right? As a busy DJ with another project or venture always on the horizon, Spotify was my go-to for music discovery. But about a year ago, I noticed that I wasn't feeling inspired by music anymore. In fact, everything I was hearing felt like lame elevator music, nondescript, unimposing, uninspired, and uninspiring. I wasn't coming across tracks I wanted to play, and frankly, I was starting to wonder if the go pressure of today's music industry had finally just sucked the soul out of music, because that's what I'm looking for when I'm searching for tracks: soul. So I did a little digging, and what I learned led me to quit Spotify. In addition to running recruitment ads for ICE last year, I learned that Spotify co-founder and then CEO, now executive chairman Daniel Ek, invested $700 million in a German AI weapons technology startup named Helsing, where he is now chairman of the board. Mr. Ek's personal fortune is estimated at around $9.6 billion. And in the 20 years since its inception, Spotify has grown to be a $137 billion multi-billion-dollar company. Meanwhile, Spotify only pays musicians roughly 1/3 to 1/2 of a penny per stream. You do the math. Spotify is extracting massive amounts of wealth generated off the talents of musicians and other creatives all over the world, and its co-founder is using that extracted wealth to support AI-powered violence. No, thank you. Many artists have already removed their catalogs from the platform, and Spotify has been leaning in to AI-generated music and buying the rights to stock music to fill up its playlists, further limiting real artists' opportunity to make money from their art. No wonder I haven't been finding any tracks with soul there. So if you still have a Spotify subscription, this is your invitation to change that. Let's make companies that take advantage of artists so their leaders can support more violence a thing of the past. There are so many alternatives out there. There's Bandcamp, SoundCloud, Deezer, Qobuz, physical media, and even your local library. Personally, I ended up on Tidal for my day-to-day listening. They pay artists more, the sound quality is better, and they made it so easy to transfer my playlists, like tracks, and albums over from Spotify. And I miss sharing tracks and playlists with people. So if you cancel your Spotify subscription and switch over to Tidal, take a screenshot of your cancellation confirmation and send it over to me at Queenie@newhumansfornewearth.com, and I'll send you my Medicine House playlist, which is a selection of some of my favorite tracks. Let's support artists so they can create more art with soul. Now, let's get back into the episode. One of the things I've actually really enjoyed doing over the past, 6 or 7 years, like during my quote unquote healing journey, right, is actually going back to the content that I used to watch over and over and over again as a child and noticing all of the different ways that it programmed me. So, for instance, like if you watch any movie from the 80s or the 90s, even the 2000s, right? The product placement is so obvious. And something that kind of like comes up over and over again is this shot of like a gritty city street. And it's all gray and dirty and whatever, right? But it's also plastered with every single fast food brand that you can think of. It's plastered with Coca-Cola, right? It's plastered with some other corporation that I can't even think of right now. But the point is that this like trope turns out is really common. And what is the effect of that? It's training you to think that that's normal, that that's what a city looks like, to expect that that's what you will see when you go out in the world. And as we know, just by taking a little peek through history or even just around the world, we know that it doesn't have to look like that. But the impact of seeing this in all of these movies when we're young is that we think, of course it looks like that, because that's what cities look like. What else would it look like? This is what I've been taught a city looks like. I mean, sometimes these things are so small that it's actually hard to think of an example. Like, I'll just be watching a movie and someone will say something. I'll realize that this thing, this idea, this quote has become this like little piece in sort of my foundational understanding of how the world works, and I had no idea. And I'll be watching and I'll be like, oh my gosh. And just realizing all of the different ways that that might have impacted me is astounding. Another sort of way that this comes up is like watching gender relations in movies. Again, if you go back to like any movie from the 80s or 90s, you will see over and over again non-consensual, I want to say sexual, but non-consensual touching. Men grabbing women and kissing them forcefully. The thing that's crazy to me from this perspective about that is that that was portrayed to us as being romantic. Being non-consensually forcefully kissed was taught to us as romance. And there's all sorts of like things related to that, right? Like, I mean, there's all kinds of weird gender stuff and like comments about sexual identity and gender identity and blah, 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 blah. That if you go back just like 20 years in film, it's insane what was accepted as normal. And then if you think about the fact that that's running around in the back of your mind as well. And I mean, maybe you're hearing this and you're like, Queenie, give me a break. Like, I'm enlightened. I don't buy into stuff like that. But okay, so get this. So this is a slightly different sort of scenario, but last summer, I was in Detroit for Movement, the techno music festival. And one of the things that my friends and I did sort of in between music festival outings was we went to a like record shop that also had old books, used books. And I'm not really into vinyl, like, I'm pro physical media, but like the whole vinyl collection thing like is such a thing that I haven't committed to that hobby and I'm not sure I will. But I'm looking around this store and what do I see but this book about Leonardo DiCaprio. And of course, like the little like teenager preteen in me was like, oh my God, I have to flip through this book. Like, but it was a little out of reach. So I went up to the store owner and I was like, hey, could you grab me down that Leo book? I'd like to flip through it. And he's like, yeah, of course. So I get this book, sit down on the couch, start flipping through it. And this book is like, it's titled something like Leonardo DiCaprio, Romantic Hero. And if you're not like familiar with sort of the music and television movie, whatever sort of industry before the internet, it used to be that they would put out these like essentially PR materials, right? So, there's all kinds of books talking about the Beatles or NSYNC or whatever, and like talking about their ice cream preferences and their zodiac signs, right? I mean, this is sort of what this was. But it had come out right before Titanic. And so what they were trying to do in this book was like position Leo as this like romantic leading man. But the thing is that character, Jack Dawson from Titanic, was actually a bit of a departure from Leo's prior roles. And so they were having to kind of like shoehorn him in to this romantic hero kind of character, which is what I realized while I was flipping through this book. So, so I'm flipping through it and looking at all the glossy photos and like thinking back to being a preteen teenager, whatever, and like having this big old crush on Leo, right? And one of the things that I learned about Leonardo DiCaprio is that he likes and prefers and seeks out even characters who are disturbed characters. And as I'm flipping through this, I mean, like, I am just laughing so hard. I've never laughed like this before. I mean, it wasn't even guttural. It was like this deep sort of like releasing sort of laughter because I guess what was happening for me in that moment was like I was realizing that like I had all this kind of energy tied up and around this person, this celebrity that I mean, frankly, this like image that I had a crush on when I was a kid. And not only kind of like visiting some maybe embarrassment around that, I mean, because like time has passed and we've seen how that came out. But in addition to that, sort of like coming to more of an understanding of like what this person and their energy was really about. And in particular, realizing that like this person who formed this like, I'll say pretty substantial sort of piece of like what I thought an attractive man was, liked playing the role of disturbed characters. And I just realized like how much that wasn't serving me, right? To be attracted to disturbed men, to a disturbed man, right? And if you go back and you like look at the characters that he's played, oftentimes they aren't very good men. Not always, right? Not always. But to just have it spelled out like that for me, I mean, I just felt so released from, I mean, what I'll say is like a less than ideal sort of image of the romantic hero in my life, you know? I mean, this laughter, I laughed so hard that the store owner and like all of my friends kind of kept looking over to me and being like, "Are you okay?" And like I had tears streaming just from the hysteria and the like this hystericalness as well as the like energetic release of realizing this. I do think like I would highly recommend if you have not already, and you know, maybe the younger generations can't relate to this, but if you had movies or particular actors who like played a really significant role in your upbringing, like go back to that content and see what's running around in your mind without you even maybe being aware of it, you know? I mean, it's can be a little scary, but but it's not I think it's not controversial to say that like this stuff programs and hypnotizes us. Um, you know, and I think sort of another way to kind of point to that is like something that I've noticed as well is that even if I am completely uninterested in whatever it is that's on a TV screen, and I'll just give an example, like sports. I'm just not a huge sports fan. You can be, it doesn't matter to me, but I'm just not interested, right? Or even like the news. I don't like watching the news. It feels just kind of like I mean propaganda. But so even if I'm completely uninterested, it's like I'm still mesmerized by the moving pictures of it all. You know, and I think there's something really natural about that, or maybe better is like what that's kind of shown me is that TV hooks our attention by taking advantage of a very sort of natural and almost like evolutionary survival sort of fact about being a human, which is that movement catches our attention. And when you have moving pictures that continue for however long, I mean, not only does it hook it, but it holds it. I don't know, just kind of stepping back a little bit, it's like, okay, so what we know is on average, people in the US spend 21 hours a week watching television. That comes out to roughly about 3 hours a day. You know, it might fluctuate, right? Maybe you watch more on the weekends, right? But 3 hours a day, which is roughly a good approximate for like the amount of time between dinner and bed, right? So we spend all day at work, 6 hours a day on our devices. Maybe that includes our TV time if, you know, we're using our device. I don't know. But if you're working an office job, it's like you're spending all day in front of a computer, spending a bunch of time on your phone in between tasks. On your way home, you eat some food, you watch 3 hours of television, and then you go to bed. You know, one of the things that these on-demand video streaming subscriptions sort of tout as, you know, their features, right, is available 24/7. Available online even, you can download stuff if you know you're gonna be out of service. You can have your profile so that you have exactly what you're watching, and your partner or your kids or whoever else you live with can have their own profile so that they can have all their stuff, right? And sort of what I see, and I don't think this is necessarily controversial, right? I think we're all kind of aware of this, but like what I see is that, like, structurally speaking, if we're bought into the 3 hours a day of streaming, we're basically just spending all of our time with our devices, not connecting with ourselves or the other people around us. And it kind of like plugs into this increasing sense of loneliness that people are experiencing. And I think maybe the subtle sort of thing that we miss around it is that having that device at all times, which is what a lot of us are living in, acts as a barrier between you and connecting with another person. Because even if you're watching television with someone, and I've experienced this in my marriage and other relationships, right? Even if you're watching TV with someone and you're quote unquote sharing an experience, you're not really connecting with them, right? The connection is actually with the device. You both are putting your attention on the device, and actually you're even disassociating from your body in a sense. And it's like your attention is actually you're in your mind, right? And while you're sort of watching that content, as opposed to being in your body. And we don't talk about porn here, but there's sort of conversations around pornography that I think parallel this kind of observation. And this is something that's kind of been borne out in my own experience, sort of in the past year, not having streaming subscriptions, is that one of the things I've actually picked up doing is actually just spending time doing quote unquote nothing, but being connected with myself. So, right, so like I might put on some music that I really like and kind of just get cozy and get into sort of a meditative place. Maybe I'll put my hand on my heart and I'll just be really present with myself, really connected with myself and the divine. And it feels so good. And I even had an experience recently where I was watching something and it occurred to me, I was like, I actually don't want to be watching this. Like, what I want in this moment is actually to feel that connectedness with myself. And this show is actually getting in the way of that. And I think that the tragedy of it all is that so many of us crave that connectedness with our partners, our kids, our friends, our roommates, whoever else we live with, right? But we're so out of practice doing it. And frankly, I mean, having that conversation with someone can be a little vulnerable. Hey, I love you and I'd like to spend some time with you, and also like I want to feel connected with you, and I feel like the TV is getting in the way. What else can we do? And part of the reason we're out of practice is because we've had TV for so long, and we've been behind our devices for so long. But, before television, I mean, shoot, people played games with one another. They read books with each other, either to each other or like in the same room reading different books. I mean, that's not very connected, but I think you understand what I mean. Having conversation, listening to music together. I mean, I enjoy listening to music by myself and being connected, but you can also listen to music with someone else. Get a little cuddle on, feel connected that way. Something else that I've kind of come to realize from my experience of stepping back from streaming subscriptions is that one of the reasons I enjoyed or sort of felt compelled towards streaming movies and TV is that watching TV felt like doing something, right? And this like connects with sort of the like very pervasive sort of sense in our culture of I must be productive. It's one of the reasons I think a lot of people have a hard time sitting still and resting, right? Is we're like convinced that at all times, I must be doing something, even if it's watching television. I think this kind of really gelled for me when I started just like laying around and connecting with myself, right? And realizing that that was a totally legitimate way to spend time was like realizing that in contrast, the reason why television felt like a legitimate and safe and acceptable thing to do is because it was still kind of pinging that I'm being productive sort of part of me, right? Like at the very least, like even if I didn't quote unquote do something or make something or push a project forward or whatever, I could still say, well, I watched a couple episodes, you know? Yeah, I mean, I've been having to kind of like rewire my mind a little bit, right? In the sense of like recognizing and embracing rest and realizing that resting or even just listening to some music with no agenda other than connecting with myself is a perfectly legitimate way to spend my time. That has been a real game changer for me. I feel really vulnerable sharing that. But I realized as well that there was this like deep sense of avoidance in my TV watching. I don't know if this resonates for you, but whether it be avoiding having to have that awkward conversation of like, hey, I would really love to connect with you for real. Let's find something else to do when we're together. Shoot, let's just cuddle. Our culture has gotten so weird around physical touch and affection, and I find that sad. We're animals too. Animals like to be touched, and it's a legitimate way to spend time. I'm just gonna say it. Maybe you're avoiding sort of a realization of this relationship actually isn't really serving me anymore, or maybe this relationship never really served me, and I would rather spend time with this person watching mediocre content than be alone. I think we all come here with soul missions, lessons to learn, things to do, ways to learn to be. It can be frightening because there's sort of this deep sort of existential fear that I might not do what I meant to do here. I might fail. And I think one of the functions that zoning out and watching TV actually really serves for us is giving us a way to kind of quiet that. But it also is almost like the self-fulfilling prophecy kind of thing. It's, if I fill up all of my time being disconnected, numbed out, zoned out, watching some mediocre content that I didn't actually care about, and not giving myself the opportunity to do my mission here, to learn my lessons, to learn how to be the way that I came here to be. And it's almost like it like builds up, over the years. You're like, well, shoot, I mean, I haven't started yet. It might be too late. Might as well just watch some more television, and again, don't get me wrong. I have spent so much of my life watching TV. I'm actually like afraid. I have not sat down to like figure out approximately how many hours or years of my life I've spent watching television because like I don't want to know. I don't. I don't want to know. But like every moment is a moment to try, like an opportunity to start again. And what I've found once I sort of got over that hump of like, oh shoot, what do I do now? Was actually there's like quite a bit of things that I wanted to do. It's like it opened up some more space in my life to like really understand what it is that I like to do, to really give myself the opportunity to like step into my creativeness, right? To pursue my goals, or even just to like take care of myself on a baseline level, right? Because like I'm sure we've all skipped chores here and there because, I mean, wouldn't it be easier just to watch some television, you know? But like things, I mean, what I've seen in myself is like I read more. I love reading, you know, but when you have your subscriptions already there, when you have your furniture all set up right in front of your TV, you know, it's so easy just to sit down, turn it on, and zone out. But instead, I read again, and it feels really nice. It feels so good on my mind and my brain. You know, it doesn't leave me feeling like an ogre unless I've like stayed in bed all day reading a book like I did when I was a kid, because that feels luxurious to me now. But yeah, so I've picked up like reading some more. I mean, sewing has kind of come back into my life a little bit more, and you know, I work on my business. I work on this podcast. And there's something too, I think, about, you know, like having moved from a place where my norm, my baseline was zoning out has actually ended up giving me a lot more energy to put towards those things, right? I mean, I think we can all sort of, or we all know that experience of like after you watch several hours of television, you kind of have to like peel yourself off the couch, you know, and you're like, what's going on again? Like, what is it to be a human in this like physical reality, you know? It's like ogre energy, you know? And that's not a place to move towards your dreams or shoot, contribute towards building new earth, you know? It's not, it's, yeah, I mean, you've been harvested at that point. Your energy has been harvested. And I think we all kind of know that. But it's just like getting out of that loop can be hard. I know I've been there. I was inviting myself over to my friend's house to watch television. Like, I get it. He totally called me on it too. He was like, I feel like you're just over here because you want to watch my television. And I was like, your words, not mine. So, another thing that I've discovered after a year plus of not having streaming subscriptions is that there's actually something really fun and nostalgic about going to a movie rental place. And like, you may not have one in your area. And if you don't and you love movies, like, I would encourage you to look into starting one. We have this incredible movie, like iconic, historic movie rental place here. And it's just so fun to go to. And it kind of changed watching a movie with someone from a like, yeah, I guess let's throw on Netflix and like settle for something that happens to be there into like a fun outing, you know, and you get to like go down the aisles and read different movies blurbs together, you know, and kind of like, I don't know, there's something that is so different about it. And, you know, in addition to it being just a little nostalgic, it's like when you leave there, you have a plan. You know exactly what you're going to be watching. And you even get an opportunity to kind of build up some of that anticipation, right? Of like, oh my gosh, like I cannot wait to watch this with you, right? And it's just a little bit more, I don't know, of like a rewarding experience. And on top of all of that, you know that when you go home and you put that DVD in your DVD player, because yes, I have a DVD player now, like you know that that movie is going to work. There are no network connectivity issues, all right? You know, and that sort of just like confidence, you can't buy it anymore. You can't stream that kind of confidence, let's put it that way, you know? And I even had my friend that I watch TV with sometimes, like he actually got one of those combo DVD VCR players. And yes, so that we could watch old Disney movies. Um, not ashamed. And like when I put that video cassette in that VCR, like my muscle memory from childhood just kicked right in. I was like, I know exactly how to do this. And I don't know, it's just like, it just brought this like sort of childish like joy back to watching content, and like, look, you might be like, I don't rewatch content. I'm never going back to a VCR. That's fine. But I did and I liked it. So if there's any part of you that's been considering canceling your streaming subscriptions, or maybe my Leo anecdote convinced you and now you're like open to the possibility, like I'd really recommend it. I have just felt my life be so enriched as a result of this choice. I spend less money on content. The content that I am watching is better quality. I don't feel gross about, like, disappointed in myself, I think is a better way to put that. Like, I don't feel disappointed in myself about the kind of content that I'm consuming. I'm supporting more local businesses, whether it be my local my local theater, or, the local rental shop here, or even like thrift stores. I mean, thrift stores are a great place to get used DVDs or even cassette tapes if you're going to go that far. And I recommend you do. And of course, your library is always a source of content as well. Something else I'd love to see, because I know that a lot of places don't have movie rentals, but I would love to see sort of groups of friends or just communities kind of build their own collections, right? So, I mean, you see these like free sort of libraries all around my neighborhood. Wouldn't it be interesting if like there were more DVDs in there, right? Or I don't know, maybe you and your friends sort of have similar movie taste and you guys just sort of build up a collection together, which you all pass around, I mean, we don't need to be allowing these corporations to suck up all the value out of our communities just so that we can have the privilege of watching some mediocre content. I mean, if you think about the economics of it, you're not getting anything besides the privilege of streaming that content. You don't own anything at the end of the day. In a sense, like, the economics of streaming don't make sense to me. But I know everyone is different. So if this isn't resonating with you as something you'd like to do, that's totally okay. I'm just here saying, like, I did it and I like it. And I really appreciate as well sort of the things that have come into my life because I made the room by canceling my streaming subscriptions, right? Whether it be sewing, reading, gardening, going for walks more, going to bed earlier. I mean, how many times have you stayed up super late because you were just like, couldn't turn off the streaming? I take care of my house more. I connect with myself and my friends more. I listen to great music more. All these things are pluses. And I'm sitting here, I'm telling you, I don't feel negatively impacted. If anything, I feel like this was a net positive in my life. And yeah, so try it. It might take a few months to kind of get over that hump, but I don't know. On the other side is magic and connection and creativity and just frankly like freedom, like getting your time and your energy and your attention back. Because that's all we have at the end of the day. All right, New Humans fam. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of the New Humans for New Earth podcast. My name is Queenie. If you found this episode to be inspirational, helpful, or informative, please share it to your social media and tag us. Share it with your friends, your partner, a family member, or anyone that you love. If you loved this episode, please leave a review. And be sure to subscribe wherever you're listening to this podcast. This is how we grow the New Humans community and help inspire others to join us in co-creating New Earth. This world is what we make it. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you in the next episode.